This episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast is brought to you by On Point Pomade. Keep your beard and hair looking on point with their line of pomades and beard oils over at onpointpomade.com. Use our code BSP15 at checkout and get 15% off your total purchase order. So thanks again to On Point Pomade for sponsoring our show. This episode is also sponsored by the Bean Bastard Coffee. Head over to thebeanbastard.com and pick up any one of their delicious hand-roasted coffees. Coffee lovers will also enjoy their hand-cut and handmade espresso candles and soaps as well. If you're in the Buffalo, New York area, head to their store located at 448 Elmwood Avenue. And thanks again to the Bean Bastard for supporting this show. BREWtally Speaking Podcast is proudly sponsored by Rockabilia.com. With over 500,000 officially licensed items in their online store, you're guaranteed to find something you need. Use our code BREW and get 10% off your total order. Now on to the show. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the BREWtally Speaking Podcast. I am your host, John, and this episode's guests are Stormy Daniels and Justin Loupe, or Loupe. I'm not entirely sure. He didn't actually say his last name, but AKA the Spooky Babes. And yes, that is correct. That's Stormy Daniels. This is a really fun chat. We definitely get into some really interesting conversations in this one. For those of you maybe that don't know, Stormy has basically, aside from everything that you know about her, basically in the last handful of years has really embraced becoming a medium and kind of being a paranormal investigator and so forth. And we really go deep down into that topic throughout this whole conversation. So it was really cool getting to talk to Justin and Stormy. And I really want to give a quick shout out to basically Lindsay Manfredi of Cold for basically setting this up. Obviously, she has been friends with Stormy for a little while and had been kind of championing basically to have Stormy come on and kind of talk about her show that she'd been working on with Justin, Spooky Babes, and basically just that it would be really good. And put us in touch. And I have to say, it was a really interesting conversation. I'm really interested to kind of see how this ends up going as far as the reaction to this, because like I said, we've never talked about paranormal things on the show, and it's definitely something that I have experiences with between myself, as you'll hear me say, some exes of mine and just friends and so forth. So it's something that I don't necessarily want to discredit or want to make light of. I know some people have their own feelings about everything, that everything can be debunked, that it's all bullshit. But at the end of the day, like, no one really knows. So at the end of the day, why not at least just listen and maybe get a differing perspective on something that you don't know? And that's exactly what Stormy and Justin and I did, is have just a really interesting conversation about basically how Stormy got into, tapping into being more of a medium and kind of that side of her. She tells some wild stories. Justin basically learning how to get more acquainted with his healing powers. I think as of when I'm recording this, he is now officially a licensed Reiki. I don't know if it's an instructor or just I'm not exactly sure what the term is, but basically he is a certified to do that, I guess. But yeah, this is just kind of a trip. I did ask a Trump question. I'm not going to beat around the bush on that one, but I asked it I think I asked a really good one. It's not something in my due diligence of, reading up on Stormy or anything that she's gone through that I've really heard. It was kind of one that really came to me in the moment as she was talking about some of the experiences she's had with being, a medium and kind of being able to read rooms and kind of in talking about just some of the stuff that she had gone through in her life. So it was really cool getting to talk to everybody. I'm going to go ahead and take a sip of this beer. I'm going to tell you what I'm drinking, and we'll get right into my conversation with Stormy and Justin. Fucking delicious. I am, for this episode, drinking the Dragon's Milk Reserve. This is a very nice... It's one of my favorites out of the Dragon's Milk series that they've been doing over the last year or two at this point, where they release one every so often. This is a bourbon barrel-aged stout with peanut butter, cocoa nibs, and other natural flavors. You get a really nice... kind of chocolatey flavor up front with a nice subtle kind of peanut butter chocolate kind of aftertaste. New Holland has always just killed these Dragon's Milks, and I feel really bad for people who aren't in the distribution area of these because they do some really incredible flavors. One of my favorites out of the whole series has been the, and I'm probably going to get this wrong, the Stroopwafel. God, that thing is so fucking amazing. I wish I could just buy it by the gallons. It's so easily drinkable and it's so good. I'm going to take another sip of this real quick. Yeah, just a really nice bourbon-y barrel flavor with the chocolate, and then, like I said, like a nice finish of the peanut butter. The thing I like about this one compared to, and Dragon's Milk as a whole versus a lot of the other bourbon barrel kind of stuff, is sometimes with bourbon barrel beers, the bourbon barrel aspect of it is just so overwhelming that it just kind of hits you in the mouth, and it kind of overwhelms the other flavors that are supposed to be in with the beer. And something New Holland has always done very well, and with Dragon's Milk especially, is not letting that be the focus of the flavor. They somehow are able to almost have that be the enhancement. Like, basically the chocolate and the peanut butter go very well with a bourbon barrel base kind of, and so you're just left with this really nice balanced beer. It's stupidly fucking good. I know that this one I think is out now at this point. Like, they've stopped selling this one, so this is from my collection in my own mini fridge here in the office. And without further ado, let's get into my conversation with Stormy Daniels and Justin, aka the Spooky Babes, and I will talk to you on the other side of it. It's Justin, correct? I mean, okay. As I say, I've been looking at some of the content that Stormy sent over to the like the trailer and so forth, but it's one of those, like, as you're watching it, you're kind of like watching the trailer for the show. I was like, okay, the doll, like, I was trying to, I know I've seen it in some of your Instagram posts and stuff like that, and I've heard Lindsay kind of talk about it in some of her posts and so forth, and was one of those where I was like, is the doll, like, I was kind of paying attention to the doll at first, and I think, you were like, oh, I used to be in this band, and kind of telling the story of how you two met in the trailer, and then I was just kind of like, oh, there's that doll, and then, like, so my mind was like, how, like, where did the doll come from, and do you guys explain that in the trailer, and all that kind of stuff, so I kind of forgot some of the formalities of the names being said, introducing everybody.
Oh yeah, totally. Actually, Stormy's going to get the doll right now. Susan.
Susan. Okay, I was like, I remember it has a name. I just don't remember what it was. But I was like, I know it's like Seinfeld related. If you ever watched Seinfeld at all.
A little bit, but yeah, there she is.
And what was the story of Susan? Where did you find her or get her again?
Originally, the doll belonged to a little girl who passed away in the 1950s, and from there she was and they called in the Warrens to come and cleanse the house, and they took the doll. So they had Susan for a very long time in their museum. About 10 or 11 years ago, she was auctioned off for a children's charity, and she was purchased by another paranormal investigator named John. And one of the first locations Justin and I went to, the doll sort of made it known that she wanted to be with us. And fast forward, John gave Susan to me, and she's been with me almost 24/7 for like 6 months now.
Forgive me, I'm looking something up because some of what you just said reminded me of, I think, a podcast I just listened to the other day with the person you're referencing.
Is that or John?
John. Who the fuck is it? I guess it's Maximus McIntyre. Do you know who that is?
No.
Okay, so I was listening to
Is that maybe?
Not to me.
I was listening to Jesse Leach, the singer of Killswitch Engage, started a podcast recently, and with this guy Matt Stocks, who's a journalist overseas, over in like Europe or somewhere, and they had this guy on, and he was talking about how he is in like he's a pastor or whatever, but he also has been involved in doing I'm totally gonna blank on the correct phrasing of this, of like exorcisms and stuff like that, and had worked with the Warrens and had done a lot of stuff with them. And it was like one of those things, and I swear he said something about a John or whatever. So like all of this just is
Okay. I'll fill in the gap for you. John Zaffis.
okay.
Oh, John Zaffis.
Not John Bullard.
So it was one of those things where it's just like really weird that it's like I just listened to that podcast like a week ago.
The abbreviated version. If you want the longer version, I'll tell you. So Susan belonged to a little girl who passed away in 1955. This was, her prized possession, her binky, her whatever. And I am firmly believe that if they had buried Susan with the girl, everything would be fine. But this girl suffered, and I've done a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of mediumship. I've talked to other friends that are mediums and psychics or whatever without giving them any information. That's how I know that this information is correct, because they all come back with the same thing. And Susan will talk. She's told me things herself. We have it on phone. Anyway, the little girl suffered pretty terribly, and treatments weren't as good back then. I think she had stomach cancer. Something was wrong with her tummy, and she passed. And then the family said, she had obviously lots of dolls, lots of toys, but this one in particular just started giving them the creeps. Like it would move, or just I don't know all the details, but they called in Ed and Lorraine Warren, and they cleansed the house, and they took the doll. And Susan lived in their museum for about 50 years, I'm gonna guess. And from there, after Ed passed, a lot of those possessions went on to their nephew, John Zaffis, who you're thinking of. And he had a television show for a while called Haunted Objects, I believe.
Yeah, I think that was something they were talking about, because the guy, this Maximus guy or whatever, was talking about how when he got into working with the Warrens, that like a lot of people, you're kind of skeptical initially of the things and how everything works, and if people are somewhere along the way, people aren't kind of collectively trying to dupe you. And there's just kind of, it's kind of fascinating, because like I think, and the thing I was kind of looking forward to talking to you two about is, I've not really ever gone down this road on the podcast, but I mean, first and foremost, I mean, you guys are in New Orleans right now.
Yeah.
And my wife and I went to New Orleans early last year, right before the pandemic basically hit. And it was kind of an interesting time, because I had to put my dog that I'd had for about almost 12 years down on literally New Year's Day last year. So we had that. Then her grandmother passed away, so we had a trip to Arizona, and then basically like a week or 2 weeks later, we went to New Orleans. Weren't really feeling excited about going on a trip, because it's just like, you're dealing with a lot of other shit that kind of hit us very randomly. And I remember we went with we happened to meet a lot of friends that were down there for Shiprock, which is an annual cruise. Okay. So we met up with a lot of people that were down there for Shiprock, whether they're in bands or friends that just were going on the boat. And I think the day before they went, we went on a guided tour of the, I'm totally going to blank on it. I know it has a specialty name, but it's the cemetery that's over by the Hard Rock or the Hard Rock Cafe.
Lewis, yeah.
What was that? Yeah. Yep.
Lewis.
And I remember as I kind of was walking through, the thing that kind of kept drawing me, like, because it was weird how many people they had in there for the tours. Like I expected it to be like maybe us and one other, but there's like 6 or 7 groups in there, and it was kind of tough, because like you're just constantly running into people. And I kind of wanted to take some like photos, because there's like a lot of interesting stuff in there. To me, visually, I thought there was a lot of cool, like little things. Like I noticed when you walked in, where you're the person's there kind of to take the money or accept who, like the list of who's supposed to be there. And there's this like weird triangular, like almost like a urn of sorts on top of like a headstone, basically, or a grave marker, and no one noticed it. It was very weird. And it was just kind of interesting how like in all of this kind of white and marble was this like kind of faded gold triangular kind of urn. I have a photo of it somewhere that I took because like there also just happened to be like dead roses on it, like black and I think red. So I ended up taking some photos and stuff, but I kind of kept noticing because the hard rock hadn't been fixed basically or demolished or whatever. And it was surreal to be standing in a graveyard basically, and seeing this most recent tragedy that kind of befell New Orleans so soon, and hearing the stories of like they still haven't found the bodies. And then even hearing when one of our guides was kind of taking us to all these different spots around New Orleans, I'd heard him talking to a trainer or a trainee, I should say, a guide. And they were saying that the newer story that had been coming out was that the people that owned the casino or were owning the building of that were trying to buy more of the businesses, and none of the businesses would sell. And so they're saying that, obviously we've all heard that the materials that were being used to build that were pretty subpar, almost like it was intentionally meant to fail at some point. And possibly the now rumor that I heard at the time was that horrible accident or all of the destruction basically that was going to go on was going to lower the property value of everyone else and scare them into moving, and that then they would sell, because now who wants to have a business next to this dilapidated thing or where a tragedy happened? Like no one's going to want it. And it was kind of interesting because as I was hearing this story and knowing that that's kind of how shit can go, like where people will do something like that, it also makes you think of, because the whole thing of New Orleans is obviously a very spiritual area. And it was something, as I thought about it, where it's like, what happens to the energy that's now stuck in that building and trying to either escape or possibly possess? And it's just kind of one of those that like, you don't really think about those things sometimes. Maybe you two do more than I would, but it was something that it was just kind of eerie as I'm staring in this graveyard, looking, maybe 100 yards across the street at this building, and just being like, there's still two people in there that haven't been found and haven't been reconnected with their families, or at least the ending of rest. Exactly. And it was very kind of heavy to just think about that.
The most fucked up part about that is there was a body that was like exposed, hanging out of like windows, and it was there for, I can't even tell you how long. They just threw a tarp over it, but obviously the wind just blew it up. You could see the guy from like outside for weeks and weeks. It was fucking terrible.
Yeah. But there's so much tragedy that's happening in New Orleans, and there's so much underlying history of, catastrophes and all of this, energy being dispersed everywhere, that's why the place feels so rich, and like it really does add to the culture and the vibe of it.
Yeah. It's really, no pun intended, but it's really the perfect storm for paranormal activity, because you have this area. First of all, it's one of the oldest cities in the United States, and the older a place is, just the more shit that's happened there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you have one of the oldest cities in the United States. It has like the hurricanes, the yellow fever, slavery, all of these like terrible tragedies, wars, and it was, it changed hands so many times. And then you add that in with this melting pot of so many powerful religions. And we have the spiritualist church movement, voodoo, Catholic, just from all these other places come together in this basically, unlike any other city in the United States, possibly even any other city in the world. It's literally a bowl. We're below sea level. So you're surrounded by water, which is a conduit for energy. So it's literally the perfect storm.
Yeah, I think that was the thing during the guided tour, which, I kind of just breezed around, because what I thought was interesting was the person we had seemed definitely knew a lot about New Orleans, but I feel like was trying to really sell the guided haunted tour kind of sorts, where instead I feel like as I kind of popped around to other parts, because we weren't able to kind of see everything on this guided tour, so I just kind of like went around, and it was interesting to kind of hear the other 4 or 5 guides kind of telling different things. And at times when I was waiting for a clear shot of a marker or whatever, I'm hearing 3 different people come by and tell the big thing about this headstone, or the people that are buried in it. Obviously Nick Cage buying his way into that cemetery. But what was interesting is one of the guides had talked about how a flood with Katrina and stuff like that, like they have constant flooding issues and so forth. And, just how there's these lures that, it just keeps displacing the spirits and all that kind of stuff. And that New Orleans, like you said, is just kind of filled with that because there's not really been anywhere for them to have a final resting place just because of the constant unrest of the city. And that I thought was really interesting because it's like, it almost speaks to in a sports world, because, I'm a sports fan. So like when the Saints won the Super Bowl shortly after Katrina, and it was a big thing. It was a big moment that the city kind of really bonded over in spite of all the tragedies. But it's one of those where I feel like that's kind of the story of New Orleans as a whole from my time going there, was that it's just about no matter the setback, that town and that city will always overcome it. And I think that's, the other part of it is that its people are rich in their experiences and so forth.
We're scrappy.
Yeah, we're just really go with the flow with it.
Yeah, I mean, whenever we're in some kind of like difficult situation, or we've actually started saying, "I'm from New Orleans, bitch."
Yeah.
I mean, we survive so many things. Just the city and the people here. There's no place like it in the world. I've been all over the world. I've been to some of the oldest cities in the world. I've traveled to every state in the United States, and this will always be home. And we spent the last year on tour, the last 6 months straight. Justin and I have been living on a tour bus like for 6 months straight, and we just moved back here. It's been almost 2 months, and we're living in an old church now, which is a story within itself, obviously. And but it's good to be home, and there's nothing like it. It's definitely the most haunted city in the world. And yeah, you go on the haunted tours and the ghost tours and all of those things, and there's the tourist hotspots, and those are not even the really haunted places. It's the only place I've ever seen that you drive around town and you see real estate signs and they'll say not haunted. Like, it's a selling point, because most of the places here are in fact haunted.
Justin, how did you get into kind of being a paranormal? And I'm not exactly always like sure of the terminology. I don't want to say a hunter or anything like that, but like just kind of getting into this space. How did you get into this? Is there a story of when you were growing up where you had kind of a predilection to these things happening?
A little bit here and there growing up. It's a lot of stuff that I did suppress, and I was always kind of in touch with all of it. But I think that now in my lifetime, it just made perfect sense because I've always been someone that's almost like, try to accept mortality and death and like romanticize on it. That's what I do with my music. And like, I spend a lot of time in the cemeteries whenever I'm not supposed to be in there. It's something like it's getting fascinations with it. And now doing the paranormal stuff, like obviously it was a no-brainer that we needed to do it together. But now it's just kind of understanding it more because you can accept death for what it is. You can, read up on it and just be familiar with it. But then the afterlife thing is a totally different aspect and ballgame of it. So it's all just, it's fascination.
I'm trying to remember what was kind of your beginnings with this, Stormy? Like what were kind of the earlier inclinations maybe that, because I know you're a medium and I know you do a lot of these other like readings and so forth. When did you kind of start tapping into that or really embracing that side of yourself?
So I had a couple of pretty significant paranormal experiences my whole life, like just one or two things a year that were like, holy fuck, did that just happen? A little bit more when I was younger, up until, I would say when I was 21, the big thing that happened to me is I was still dancing in Baton Rouge. I'm from Louisiana, and I bought my first house, and it was a brand new construction, nothing strange, and then something was in the house for about a week, and I mean, it was undeniable. So it was a bunch of like concentrated paranormal stuff. I have now learned that it's because of me. They seek me out because I'm a medium, but I didn't know that then. And I mean, it was fucked. There was growls coming from the house. There was a fly infestation. There was lights around, like dancing around the room. Like multiple people saw it. But that was the only thing that happened that year. fast forward to I'm 23. I'm standing in the kitchen. I've now moved to LA and I'm living in this big mansion with a guy, a famous director. And I had a premonition standing at the sink that his daughter was going to pass away. And 5 days later, we buried her. And so it's like these one or two big things. But then I got very active in the adult business. I was traveling all the time. I was working every day. I was writing, directing, dancing, starring. I mean, I had this walking red carpets. Like, I was just so busy that I didn't tap into it. You know what I mean? And then 2 years ago, I moved back to New Orleans and I rented a house that was super fucking haunted. I mean, everything in New Orleans was haunted, but this place was next level. And it was when I was living in that house that, like, all the things you see in horror movies happened. Sounds, knocking, scratching, smells, insect infestation, things breaking, shadows, things caught on film. I was at one point, like, I had physical health problems. My hair fell out. I was bleeding from the eyes and the nose. During that time, I met Justin and we became very good friends. He would come over and we would talk about paranormal stuff. Justin was a big paranormal fan. I had never watched any of the shows. I didn't know who the paranormal celebrities were, but he was more knowledgeable than I was at the time. So we would talk about things. And then I just got sicker and sicker and, like, more of this house just consumed. I mean, I will never be able to find the words to explain what happened to me in that house, but everybody that stepped in there had a pretty significant, unexplainable experience, including Justin. And it was when I was moving out that Justin had an experience in my downstairs bathroom, and he was so freaked out. I ended up not going back to the house after that night. I stayed on his couch for a month. And it was kind of in that time period that we really wanted to understand what was happening. I reached out to all the other shows, the Ghost Hunter, like all of those shows, and asked for help, and nobody responded to me. And I thought I was going crazy. I had a couple people who were like, "What? Okay, the stress of all the political stuff is getting to you, girl. You're nuts. You need to get on medication." I was like, "No, I have this stuff on film." Justin's, he's a lot younger than me. But he's one of the smartest, most rational people I know. He's one of the first to debunk stuff. And he was like, "No, bitch, this is real. Let's figure it out." So I'm the first one to say we actually started Spooky Babes because I'm a petty bitch and wanted to prove some people who said I was lying wrong. I mean, that's how it started. But then we went to a couple of locations, and what we got was so intense and so significant and definitely kind of centered towards me. Like, I walked in these places and knew shit that I should know. So, I think people were like, "Stormy, you're a medium." Then COVID happened. So I think we only did 2 investigations before COVID. And then COVID happened and everybody was in that severe quarantine lockdown. And so for what that meant for me was that for the first time in almost 20 years, I was stationary. You know what I mean? I quarantined because I'd moved out of the house here. I went back to Dallas and quarantined with my daughter's father and my daughter. And that was also a house that I had had for 6 years, but it was brand new, definitely not haunted. Never had anything strange happen there, but just being, in one place and quiet with no work, combined with this collective energy of the entire planet of all, being afraid and panicked. With the uptick in deaths, just created all this extra energy, and stuff started happening in the house. Like, I made the joke all the time that I started coming out of my bedroom in the morning, and my living room looked like the Beetlejuice waiting room. I started there are dead people. I was like, literally, I see dead people. And I reached out to some people. I found somebody whose uncle had been missing. Unfortunately, the guy had passed away during camping from COVID, but I found the body remotely. I told them where to look. I found a water leak in somebody's house. I just knew things. And so it started happening and it got a little bit intense. So that was April, May, June. And then we took the tour bus out in July and we've been filming ever since. And the more you do it and the more you learn, because we knew nothing when we started and nobody would help us, which is a whole nother thing. The people in the paranormal field really shunned us, especially me. I mean, I was attacked brutally. She does porn. She shouldn't be allowed to do this. They're such big, prejudiced assholes.
Right.
They thought I was fake. They're like, "Oh, she just wants attention." no, this is not the attention I want. I was doing just fine. Plus, I'm pretty sure coming forward and saying that I talked to dead people will ruin my court cases because there's your insanity, like dismissal, you know?
Right.
And then they were super jealous because I had the tour bus and we were filming and whatever. They're like, oh, it's not fair just because she fucked somebody that she gets handed this show. And I was like, what I did, that's the thing, is we're self-funded. I believe this so much, and I was so freaked out by what happened to me in my house that I invested my own $300,000. Nobody gave me a show.
Right.
I paid for this. And anybody can have a show if they pay for it, but I think a lot of people don't understand that. And along the way, Justin and I have learned a lot and gotten different skills. And I started reading cards. I've never been wrong. Knock on wood. You know, we have Susan now. She's pretty special. We live in this haunted church in New Orleans. We're doing all these things, my gifts have definitely developed, and I've become more comfortable and accepting and more open-minded. And I have seen shit in the last year that everything that you thought was real is not. Or, you know, it's next level. The footage that we have rivals any show that I've ever seen on TV. But the most impressive part about this experience is the things that Justin can do now. Like, I might be good at reading cards or picking up on energies or chasing ghosts or whatever it is that you want to call me. I'm not psychic. I can't predict the future, so I'm more of a medium. I'm not even really sure what I am, honestly. I carry around a doll. I'm a fucking weirdo. But
Conduit.
But Justin can actually like heal people now. We were on a TV, like not a TV show. We were on a show last week, and the host called him out, and Justin healed him and freaked him the fuck out. Like, he can do things I can't even.
They're like, without even touching him, like it was energy healing, just like I'm not touching you, but I'm healing you. It's crazy. I don't know how to explain it, but it's a thing, and I'm investigating it.
So, I mean, there's a handful of things that, as you were talking, that kind of thinking about, like, popped up some questions. There's not really a nice way to say this, so I'll just fucking say it. You know, obviously, the perception of people who are in the adult entertainment industry is that they're broken or there's something wrong with them, which I think, based on all the people I've ever encountered in the industry, and, you know, we just launched the episode with Aaron Smallhands, and I mean, that dude is like probably one of the smartest dudes I've probably had on the show, like so well-rounded because of the life he's lived outside of porn, even before that, just being a touring musician, working, you know, in the cocktail game, you know, being a bartender and so forth. Like, that dude's lived so many fucking lives, as has, you know, Joanna, talking to her and stuff like that. It's one of those that most of the time I feel like people look down on the people in that entertainment industry because they're more free than they could ever possibly imagine being. That said, you know, I know, and Aaron and I's talked that there was a comment, you know, about how, like, there are people, like, there should be a higher age other than 18, you know, maybe it should be 21, just like the legal drinking age and so forth, to be able to be a performer, just for, you know, a lot of the mental reasons and so forth. But as you were talking about, you know, people discrediting your abilities as a medium because, well, you did porn, I immediately kind of went the other way and was like, did you ever have experiences with your powers through, you know, basically in the medium sense, being around as many people as you probably were between sets, you know, other people you started with, and for as long as you were in that space?
I didn't have anything paranormal happen in the business. So the simple answer to that is no.
Okay.
I do think, looking back, that part of whatever it is that I am made me such a good director. Like, I get the best performances out of people because I can help them with their like, explain things and help them with their energy. I you know, there's a reason why I've had the same crew. 80% of the people who work for me have been with me for over 10 years, 15 years. You know, I have a camera operator that's been with me since day one. You know what I mean? There's usually, in the adult business, like, the crew changes a lot. Like, they bounce around, and my crew is very loyal to me. And when I started doing Spooky Babes, I actually brought my adult crew with me. And we're shopping the show now. Obviously, we have, you know, I can't talk too much about that, but one of the things that I am sticking to my guns is that, you know, whoever buys the show has to understand that they don't get to hire their mainstream crew. These are my ride or dies, and they're
right.
So the short answer to your question is no, but maybe in a way it helped my directing skills.
Well, actually, it almost begs the question then. I almost feel like, where you were saying a lot of people didn't want to help you start kind of honing these skills or helping you in any way. I almost feel like by having that crew that you've worked with that's been so dedicated and tight knit actually lends more credibility to what you're doing, because they have spent time with you. They know you as a person and how you work and all that kind of stuff. So I feel like that actually lends more credence to what you've done, because they have no reason. I mean, from my perspective, they would have no reason to lie, because, there's just not really a reason. The adverse, though, is, as you were saying, like, in the last year, really since the pandemic's happened, you've kind of been able to harness and focus more of what you do. And even Justin's kind of grown into these extra set of skills, basically, that he's still figuring out and learning about what he can do. When you guys got together and started talking about these things, or just kind of experiencing things together, did it feel like just this magic and this chemistry of like, oh my God, like, you're both shaking heads right away. So I guess there's the answer to my question right there.
Yeah. I mean, there's definitely, from the moment I met Justin, there was something, special there. And he's not my boyfriend. We've never been a romantic item. He's my family. I'm closer to him than I've ever been with anybody. We've never had a fight. We lived in a tin, like a tin can, basically.
Yeah.
He's definitely my soulmate, but he's not my romantic partner. But there's just something there, and I knew it from the first night I met him, and we hung out, and he came over to have a drink and was supposed to stay an hour and stayed 12. And we just talked and talked and talked. And we've basically almost been together since. And the days that we weren't together, we definitely, but I don't think there's a single day that's gone by in the 2 years we've known each other where we didn't at least talk multiple times. Yeah. And there's, I won't do this without him, and I can't speak for him, but he better fucking feel the same way.
Do you feel like that's a hard thing to kind of also overcome? Like, I know, like, I personally have a lot of female friends, and a lot of people are like, oh, like, if I hang out with like one of my friends, like doing the podcast, sometimes I go to concerts and I'll interview someone and then I stick around for the concert, but I have, an extra +1 or whatever. And my wife's not always able to come out with me because it's a Tuesday night and I still have, 4 or 5 hours to drive back home. So I'll invite some of my friends out that are into those bands. And I know that the perception is like, you can't be friendly with someone of the opposite sex. And I always think it's such a shitty way to discredit a relationship just based on the fact that someone doesn't believe that that's how a relationship can be. Do you feel that maybe that's another avenue that some of the people, when you're shopping the show, are like, oh, there's another hook we could sell this show on. Oh, wait, never mind. They're not a couple, or they're not brothers, or they're not related, or whatever. Like, it always seems like with these paranormal shows, there's like got to be some other hook than just literally what the hook of the show should be, which is.
You know what? I think it might actually help, because people are going to be like, oh, they're into each other. We're going to have enough access to hook up. Yeah. Like, whatever makes them keep coming back and watching, that's
fine.
And
the cliffhanger's just going to be forever.
Yeah.
Forever.
I was fortunate enough. I've had one boyfriend since Justin and I have been close, since we've known each other, really. Mm-hmm. And he's also in the paranormal field, but he never questioned me and Justin's relationship because he saw it. And if you don't see it, you don't understand. Yeah. Like sometimes I have fans make snarky comments on my Instagram or my Twitter, like, oh, where's your little boy toy? And I'm like, hey, you know what? If you think that I'm hot enough to get something this beautiful, fine. But I don't ever, he's been my date to all the award shows and stuff too. But I think people are kind of slowly started. I'm sure when we first started hanging out, that was like the big thing. But now everybody kind of, if you see us together, you know. I don't care that much what people think. It's not like, hey, it's not like he's horrible to look at. So if I'm watching my boyfriend,
well, you got that 18 to like 35 female demographic built in right there. Justin, kind of an interesting question for you. Obviously, you talked about earlier about how you kind of as a vocalist of a band and so forth have talk about some of these things. In the last year or so since really doing this, have you really found yourself exploring more of what you've seen and the unknowns of kind of some of the powers you're now kind of learning about in yourself, that it's opening up new channels lyrically for you at all?
Yes. So really the thing with, well, I know it's funny because the stuff that I've written since quarantine. And since quarantine, we've been touring. Like, we totally fucking cheated, like, the whole quarantine thing. Like, we made it our bitch.
Yeah, I mean, we were the only tour bus rolling for several months.
Yeah, but with that being said, like, I couldn't rehearse with my band. Like, I do write everything, record it all, but, like, I can't, rehearse for shows and all of that. So to be more independent and to really, like, do, like, the whole live stream thing that's going on, I picked up the acoustic and started writing acoustic songs. And the stuff that I've written about lyrically as of late has been very, very sad. Just very depressing stuff. But I am a storyteller in that aspect of, like, not really fantasy, but real, situations that are kind of maybe hard to talk about for some. I do feel like that will come out eventually, because even if I don't want it to happen, it just naturally comes out in your art and in my lyrics. So it'll sneak in. I'm waiting for it.
Stormy, have you, obviously I know you've written at least one book that I know of for sure. I think Lindsay was saying that you're in the process of writing another one currently.
Oh, Justin and I are writing one together.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it's actually Justin's book, but
it's just the experience. It's really just the touring experience, and it's a chapter of my life that I want to document while it's still fresh. And it'll be very entertaining because we get into a lot of crazy shit, and we literally are like Motley Crue Paranormal. That's what I say all the time. So just the stories and craziness just happens to find us everywhere. So we have really good stories.
I think that's what's going to make our show so unique. Is not only, yes, we have this incredible paranormal footage. Like, it rivals any of the shows I've seen except maybe Hold Your Files. Like, that's the only one that I'm like, holy shit, this is the closest thing to the evidence that we've captured. And then we also, have the healing aspect. Like, we have aftercare. We want to help people. I do readings. Justin's getting his Reiki certification next week, actually. I have a CBD company with all these products that are to help people. Because a lot of times when people have paranormal stuff happen and they think they're crazy, their first step is to go to the doctor and get sleeping pills and like psych drugs and whatever. And then there is definitely a place for that. Like, sometimes you go to a location and you're like, this isn't haunted. You need a medical doctor. So I'm not taking away from that. But, like, all of these alternative medicine things, and just we're like so committed to finding the answer and the truth and not treating the spirits like freak shows and not stirring up bad energy, but also helping the people that have these issues. So there's that aspect of our show, which is different too, but people love reality shit. They love crazy stuff. So we'll have the paranormal fans. We have our own conscience satisfied because we're doing the healing stuff and we're making sure that we're doing ethically the right thing, I suppose is the best way to put it. But the fun side is, you watch some of these paranormal shows and the people in the show look like they don't even fucking like each other. Anybody who hangs out with me and Justin, put your seatbelts on because we're probably going to break stuff. We're going to get. Oh yeah. I mean, we went to a fancy part of our house that, like, in Hollywood. There was like this fancy house. On Mulholland Drive. We ended up getting drunk and fighting on the guy's kitchen floor. It's just what we do. Justin got drunk and asked for piggyback rides all the time, and apparently we discovered that if you can ride a Stormy Daniels into a bar in Florida and they will serve you a Jack and Coke without batting an eye.
Yeah.
That happened. It's just, plus we have our other stuff going on. Like, I am still who I am. That's an ongoing thing. So I still have all of that stuff. And Justin has his music. So we're not.
True.
He's also a very talented special effects makeup artist. There's like so much stuff. And now we live in this church and weird stuff happens. It's just, we're the most fucked up paranormal family ever. Susan.
Yeah, one of the things too that I would like to add to that as well, that I think is very important to the show and for the viewers, and like the ultimate vision of it, is we definitely are the type of people that it's documented. Like, in the show, we want other people to kind of relate to us, and if you can get someone to like relate to you and kind of be friendly toward them without even really making a connection, then they're going to really take this stuff more seriously and maybe consider it. Consider their beliefs or tearing down walls or stuff. So I feel like we are very comfortable and can make other people comfortable.
We're very approachable.
Yeah, we're approachable. And I think that has a lot to do with how it's going to go.
I've always been very approachable because I worked in the adult business. People have no fucking filter. Real thing. I had an elderly lady ask me for anal sex tips in a produce section of a Ralph's one time. Like, because they think that you work in the adult business and you're so free and you're so open. You know, I make the joke all the time. Like, I have nothing to hide. I saw my butthole on a jumbotron in Finland. Like, like I have literally nothing to hide. And so people are come up and be open and talk about stuff because they're like, okay, well, I can't offend this chick, or she's seen it all, or like, so they're open and they come to me because of my past in the adult business. There's nothing they can say to me that they can shock me with. You know, I do stand-up comedy as well, and I can't tell you how many times people write questions on note cards because at the end of my show, I end with audience questions, and it's anonymous. I can't tell you, and Justin will tell you because he picks up the note cards when I'm on stage doing comedy. I can't tell you how many note cards I've read where literally my answer was like, call a doctor. Like, you know, like you're more comfortable telling me what your discharge looks like than
right.
Like, you know, like literally people will tell me anything. And the flip side of that is Justin's got this great energy, and he's young and vibrant and cool and like alternative looking. I don't know if that's the right word, but like he just has this great approachable energy, and he's genuinely one of the most
I don't look
nice people
judgmental.
And he's not. He's genuinely probably the nicest human being I've ever met. So if you can either relate to me or you can relate to him because we're the same, but we're also so different.
I think, you know, that's the kind of thing that's interesting about when you talk about, you know, paranormal shows and so forth is you get a lot of people who, you know, are so skeptical because of trick editing or, you know, whatever. And I feel like both of you basically, you know, Justin being in the music business and so forth, and, you know, all of that is like, you know, to even be remotely successful is like, you know, 1 in a million. And then Stormy, obviously, to have had the career that you've had and sustain it and be able to have success in the multifacets that you've gone through, you know, writing a book, people probably told you, well, probably can't write a book, or directing. Like, what do you know about that?
I didn't write the book. I challenge anybody right now to get my book and read one page of it and tell me that it's not me.
Right. So it's one of those things, like, I feel like the two of you are examples of thriving in situations or fields that basically would put a lot of people off because of the hard work and just how behind the eight ball basically you're going to be at all times.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's going to be skeptics when all of the show is finally released, does that kind of make it a little bit harder to do this and just kind of be like, it sucks knowing that like we had some really wild, amazing shit and we're showing everybody these things and showing like what's actually happening and what we're experiencing, and that people are just going to be like, nah, it's all fake. It's all cameras. It's all tricks. It's all whatever.
I think Justin kind of feeds on it a little bit. Like he takes it as a challenge.
I mean,
part of me does too, because I'm tenacious and stubborn, and you know the fastest way to get me to do something is to tell me that I can't. But at the same time, a huge trigger for me, my entire life, to be quite honest, but more so in the last 4 years for very obvious reasons, is a trigger for me is to be called a liar. Because I mean, I'm honest to a fault. To be truthful, like, I mean, being honest completely fucking ruined my life. Like, you know, so I wouldn't do this if it wasn't the truth. I wouldn't have invested $300,000 of my own money. I wouldn't have, you know, I would have at least waited till all my court cases were done before I publicly came out. I see dead people. Like, I hear spirits. Like, I mean, do you realize the press is going to have a fucking field day with that? And it could do some serious damage to these cases that I have a lot of money tied up in. I mean, we all know what those are, and I don't need to talk about them. But I mean, if you're in the middle of a high-profile court case with one of the most powerful people in the world, do you really think that's a good time to come out and be like, I see ghosts? You know, perhaps I should have sat on that for a while. It's definitely not going to help my case. But I couldn't because, like I went back, like I said, I'm too honest for my own good, clearly.
I have a question, and it's just because I sometimes ask things that maybe I shouldn't. And I can cut this out if you. I can cut it out, or you don't have to answer it. But either way, just out of the curiosity, did you get any like kind of vibes or anything kind of like alerting you that like maybe the person you're talking about that you're going through these cases with, like that something may not be like something bad or whatever may happen as a result of your interactions with them?
Parts to that. Before I went, yes. I clearly remember standing, and I love that you asked this because all these paranormal interviews and stuff I've done, no one has asked me this question.
I just know with the litigious nature of what's going on that like that's why I didn't mention any names. I didn't mention any of that kind of shit.
I will. People tell me all the time, "Aren't you afraid of ghosts?" I'm like, "I already saw Trump naked."
Fair enough.
I already stared down an orange goblin, like, come at me, ghost. Like, it's not a thing.
Pumpkin bomb in your ass.
Like, I have this a very long time ago.
Yeah.
And a lot of things have happened. And there are parts of that weekend that I'm like, I don't remember. Nothing to him, just whatever. But one of the clearest memories I have is I went with a friend of mine, Alana, and this other girl, Cindy, and they were getting tattoos. And I wasn't, but they were in a tattoo shop.
Hold on just a second. What did you say the first girl's name is?
Alana.
Is that the artist?
No, she's a porn star. Her name's Alana.
Okay. I was gonna say there was this artist, Alana Gore, I believe. She did a famous drawing of Trump naked with a micro dick.
But this was
okay.
That fateful night and you know,
okay.
2006. Anyway, they're getting tattooed, and I have this very clear, like, I mean, literally it could have been yesterday. And I'm standing outside on a street corner in Tahoe, outside the tattoo shop, and I'm on the phone with my publicist. And I clearly remember him saying, like, what do you have to lose? If nothing, you'll get a good story out of it. Like, I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, it also gets you out of this other thing that you don't want to go to. He had a very valid point there. And I was like, I remember saying, Mike, I got to tell you, something in my gut tells me that this is not a good idea. He was like, well, did he seem creepy? Do you have a bad vibe? And like, was something inappropriate said? And I was like, no, not at all, which is true. And I was like, I just have a feeling. And he was like, I think you, as your publicist and your manager and whatever, he's like, I think you should go. If it gets weird, just get up and walk out. He's like, don't drink, don't have anything to drink. And I wasn't a drinker back then. I and he was like, keep your phone on you, make sure it's charged, tell everybody where you're going to be. And he's like, first, bad signs say you have to go to the bathroom and leave. I was like, I still like, oh, and you can ask Justin right now, this is something to this day that I'm working on. And I've gotten exponentially better in the last several months. Like when I have a gut feeling, I vocalize it now. I tell him, I'm so much better. So much better,
but still working on it.
I know. But I did. And then he was like, I pushed it aside. Now, I will tell you that when I was physically in there and I was in the moment, we were having the conversation, and the story's been beat to death a million times. It's in my book or whatever. I did not have a bad vibe. Like, he was a dick. He was arrogant. I checked him, and we went on to have that's one over there. I went on to have a very, very interesting and good conversation. And I think part of it was, and I wasn't drinking, but I was young and naive, and I was in the middle of, proving myself as an independent, smart woman. And and it was complete and utter shock when I walked out of the bathroom. But at the same time, I have kind of learned only in the last couple of months, really, to make peace with it, everything happens for a reason.
Right.
And people go back all the time and say, do you regret coming forward? And sometimes I make the joke of saying, like, I didn't really have a choice, but I would regret going to that hotel. But sitting here right at this very moment, and I could feel completely different tomorrow or the next day or even in an hour. No, because every step led me to where I am right now. It led me to all the things that happened, all the experiences I had, it led me to hitting that rock bottom where I met my best friends. That gave me the opportunity to do this show, which is not about doing a show. There's I've been on lots of shows. I don't need to be on a TV show. I was on now. Nothing's ever going to top that experience for me. You know what I mean? But I have the opportunity to use the name that came out of this, like, I'm going to go ahead and say tragedy. For me, it was a tragedy. Like, my complete life was like all of my life was completely ruined. I lost my family. I lost my child for a while. I lost my career. I lost my house. I lost my horses. I lost my entire identity. And so something good has to come out of it. And for me, I think this is it. And I'm fortunate enough that I met this person who doesn't want anything from me. He's, you know, and he's on this journey with me. And I think that we have a chance to help people. I really do, because there's no way in hell that I'm the only person that had these experiences, that had something in my house that, you know, I'm just the most famous person that it's happened to. And right now I have the attention of the world. And if I can use that as my platform,
then we're going to fucking kill it, dude.
So I have another interesting follow-up question to that. Not about that, just kind of actually switching topics, but having myself recently gone to therapy over the last couple of months, and it's something I've talked about habitually on this show. You know, they talk about when you are a therapist, basically, you know, you're hearing all these people's problems, you're helping people work through problems, and that you kind of need an outlet for yourself to kind of purge some of these things that you're dealing with and taking on day in and day out for your profession. Adversely, I would imagine the same has got to happen for you with everything you're experiencing between, you know, Justin, with you like potentially being able to start healing people and maybe in a different capacity than you are currently, and Stormy, you know, with everything that you as a medium are able to kind of take on. I would imagine you're very much an empath because you're able to take on these things and see things happening that are tragedies, like you were saying earlier about, you know, the person you're with, you know, daughter passing away a few days after you had the premonition. Has it made you start maybe going to therapy if you hadn't already, or is it making you, you know, you were just saying something that really spoke to me, because one of my things in therapy was setting boundaries and vocalizing the boundaries and addressing them when people were crossing them or whatever, because I was not good at that. So when you were saying, you know, that you're getting better at when you have a gut feeling or something within, you're vocalizing it now. So that's kind of where my thought of like, have you started seeking out therapy, or have you been going to therapy? And if so, has it either strengthened what you're going through together or separately, or, you know, anything like that?
So that's a very good and a very interesting question for a couple of reasons. When I was living in the house that I have referred to, I had a partner and it was a shit show. And we actually did try to go to therapy, and I found that no therapist in the world is equipped to handle what I went through. Like, there's no support group. I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not a drug addict. I'm not there because I lost a child. You know what I mean? Like, I'm the only person in the entire existence of the universe who had the experience I had. There's just not enough people. The therapist that I had, I went to her like 3 or 4 times. She was wonderful. She was so cool. She was so sweet. It was beyond her realm of capabilities. Plus, I'm so afraid of, you know, them going. I know that they're obligated not to tell. But
I don't mean shit though.
I just don't trust it. And I mean, Justin, basically, the poor kid was my therapist. Probably still is. He gives better advice than any of the therapists I've ever talked to. And that's the truth. And I mean, I've just kind of learned how to fix it myself, I guess, which is not advice that I would give to anybody else, but nobody else is Daniels. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really have too much of a choice.
Right.
And I think me being so fucked up when Justin and I met, like in every aspect, because I lived this life when he and I met, it would have been about 18 months when he and I met, of zero privacy, being shot at, constant death threats. I didn't take a piss by myself without 2 armed black men standing over me for over a year. Like, that fucks with your head. You know what I mean? And I was messed up. Then combined with the fact that, you know, I'm going to all these appearances and people are crying and telling me I have to save the world and dumping all this energy. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I said, please stop crying. I have to take my panties off now. There's no crying in strip clubs, because people are at the stage.
Yeah.
You know, and then when my book came out and it talked about sexual abuse and rape and things like that, and then I have all these people coming to me and, you know, sharing their stories, and go to a therapist. I was a therapist.
Right.
And then I met Justin, and he had no fucking idea who I was, because he probably doesn't know who the president is right now. And that's a blessing for me. And because I was messed up. That's how we figured out he was a healer, because I was struggling so hard at the time. And full disclosure, like, I wanted to die. I laid on my floor in my house for like 3 days and just wished to die. Like, I was like, I've lost everything. And Justin took care of me. And there were these times where, like, when I was the most like distraught, and he would just stay with me or like put his arms around me or whatever, the next day he would be violently ill. Like, violently ill. Like, I thought I had to take him to urgent care a couple of times. And then I figured out the pattern. And that's how we figured out that he was whatever it is that he is.
Absorbs bullshit.
What was that?
A healer who just like absorbs bullshit and I guess gets it out by vomiting.
Well, I think that, that's kind of the thing for me, is like I almost had something similar. Like, I mean, not quite the same, I would say, as like where you're taking it on, but like I had the day coincidentally of the Capitol being rioted. I had a random person reach out to me that I don't really know, but through the power of social media, you're quote unquote friends with everybody. Right. And it was just kind of very weird. And then finally they were like, oh, I'm going to kill myself. But like, they live in another country. So I'm like, literally like, man, what the fuck? Like, I literally just had to like go to my uncle's funeral of like my best friend, like a week later, like passed away. And then like, now I got this. And like, I'm just emotionally tapped. Like, I don't have anywhere to put it. And it was one of those things, like, I remember I had to do this with my co-host, and like, I was like, hey man, I'm going to be a little bit late. I'm dealing with something. And I came in and then like told him what was going on and just fucking broke down for 20 minutes, like over this. And then I was like, dude, I can't do this anymore. I can't keep taking people's baggage on top of mine that I'm not even able to, like, I have so much baggage of other people. And I love the fact that people come to me. Like, it's a great feeling, but it's such a heavy burden at times to take on these things, because, part of, like I was saying earlier, part of my thing was setting boundaries. And, like the other side of that was I was seeing a lot of, I would overthink things. And, I was coming up with problems that weren't even happening, and then trying to come up with 19 solutions to these problems that weren't even happening.
Pisces?
What was that?
Are you a Pisces?
No, I think I'm a Virgo, but I think I'm a cusp. I'm September 20th is my birthday. So I know I'm like on the cusp of whatever the next one is. But it's just one of those things. Like I know for me that's something that like I struggled with is taking on a lot of other people's stuff. And, I've had, some of my tattoo artist friends on here. Was one of the first podcasts. I was joking with him at the time, that you're basically a cut rate therapist because of shows like, whatever the fuck that show with Kat Von D was, yeah. But it was one of those things where I was like, because of those shows, everybody's horrible story became like why you're getting a tattoo. It can't be because like, oh, I just like something stupid I have, like where it's like on a tour I did, a buddy of mine gave me a pizza tattoo with a pentagram, and I was like, oh, it's just fucking funny because like the thing I love hurts me the most because I get heartburn from it, but I love eating it and I'll still eat it, but like it tears me up. So it's a joke. It's not serious. It's not one of those where it's like, oh, my tattoos have meaning. They do, but not like serious, like some horrible shit I went through. And so I was telling him, I was like, I feel like because of that show, like you hear horrible stories day in and day out. And then he was like, yeah, like I did this tattoo on an older lady and it was her first one. I'm like, hey, what happened? Like, why are you getting this? Like, tell me a little, like, trying to learn a little bit about herself. And she, and he was like, she tells me that like, it's because she finally left her abusive husband of like 30 some odd years. And this is like her thing of like finally being free. And like, then she'd go into detail about what happened. And you're just like, you hear these stories day in and day out. And I go, well, what does that do to you when you go home? Cause like you're taking on all this shit and then you're going to go home to like your either yourself and then just sit in it, or you're going to go home to a girlfriend or a spouse. And, while they're sitting there going, and it's not demeaning or lessening their day, but like, or their experiences, but they're like, oh, Carol, that crazy bitch at work today, she was making my life difficult. And you're like, yeah, I had to hear about a lady who had been in an abusive relationship for 30 fucking years and hear about what they're doing and things like that. And it's just like, we don't think about those things. That's the other side of these things we don't think about. So when listening to you two talk, it's one of those where, and like I said, since I've been talking about therapy and talking about mental health a lot more on this podcast, it's one of those that you're dealing with things that people can't see and a lot of times can't even understand what you're going through and experiencing. So how do you get through your days? And it sounds like it's through each other, like having each other's back, literally, and being there for each other. It sounds like how that works for you.
Definitely. And we've actually, to go back to the tattoo thing, Justin and I have actually talked about that quite a bit. One of the most haunted places, or I don't want to say haunted, one of the most active paranormal places I've been to is a tattoo studio. It's not a famous location. Nobody knows about it. It's actually a friend of mine's shop, and I had to go in and do some work there because, yes, it's so much energy. People, I have some tattoos that are just fun and silly, like, my Team Stormy tattoo. He's got the same one. That's just a fun one. I have a couple of other like really fun ones, but then I have some, the girl that I told you passed away. I have her name tattooed on me. I have the tattoo that on my stomach. It's a clock stopped at the time of my daughter's birth. That's a great joyous moment, but it's a lot of energy. Like all of my tattoos don't necessarily mean something, but a lot of them do. And so you have these tattoo artists and they're either getting something emotionally charged because of something terrible, like you just said, or a portrait of somebody who passed away, or they're getting a fucking cover up for somebody who broke their heart and they got their name tattooed on. There's so much energy in these tattoos combined with physical pain.
Yeah.
And I think about the women who have their mastectomy scars tattooed over.
Yep.
The one on my stomach is to cover my seat. It's a medical scar that I had covered, from having my daughter. And so you have intense emotions combined with physical pain, combined with let's just go ahead and say what tattooing is. It's
therapy.
It's bloodletting.
Oh, well, yeah, that too.
Yeah. But
yes, but so it makes the tattoo artist a therapist. Kind of like strippers, but with less alcohol, hopefully.
And their clothes is on, hopefully.
It's I would say it's a little bit cheaper, but I actually don't think it is. I think tattoos can actually cost if not more in some instances.
Good titties in your face and good tattoos are pretty.
That stuff
pretty
you don't
expensive.
really, don't. You got to pay like $1 for.
Yeah.
Get what you are.
I mean, not entirely. I definitely, it sucks because like I'm at that point now with having a lot of friends that tattoo where you're like, oh, you must have spent so much money, and you're like, I mean, I'm going to tell you the going rate. That's not what I'm paying.
Yeah, right?
Like,
No,
yeah.
Sure.
Kind of slowly and wrapping up. Obviously you had said that, I think something that's always commendable because, you said like, anyone can kind of have a show. And, I'm like, I laughed when you said that for anyone who maybe watched this back down the road that I laughed. The reason I laughed was because I was like, yeah, I have a fucking show. And the whole reason I started it was because I got tired of seeing people interview some of my favorite bands and some of my favorite like people in bands. And like, they're just shit in the bed, basically. I'm like, what? Like, oh, where'd you come up with your name? And you're like, dude, this band's been around for 10 fucking years. You got 30 minutes with this dude. And that's one of the questions you're asking? Like, what the fuck? Come on, do better. And
Yeah, be original, man.
yeah. And so like the thing for me was, something that weirdly that I have an innate talent, I guess, is talking to essentially strangers and having them open up to me and telling me things that probably shouldn't tell someone that you just met. And then same, like,
I have too. Some people I talk to are dead.
I don't have that I'm aware of. I do have sometimes I have these weird things like deja vu, basically, like where I will be like, I swear I dreamed this, or did this happen already? Like I have those, but like never enough that I'm like writing it down or anything. Maybe I should, just to be like, hey, yeah, like 6 months ago I had this thought or this idea that something was going to happen, and then it fucking did. Maybe not quite the way I thought, but it is interesting kind of, talking to you guys. And I have, usually I'm Mr. Over Prepare. I write a shitload of questions down because I at least like to have the ability to, if the conversation's not really going well, to at least be like, okay, like here's some bullet points I can kind of hit and create like a little bit of an arc conversationally. But this was one where I was like, man, like between a couple exes of mine and I sharing stories of like, like my ex had told a story about going to an abandoned house in Detroit and basically some scary shit happening. And like, I was like, oh, I did the same thing. I went to an abandoned paper mill in my old city that I grew up in Parchment. And I heard cats. And I was like, oh, that's weird, cats. Like, because no one had been in that. The facility hadn't been opened for decades. And I know bums live there because it's free housing, basically. But we went to like the basement part of this factory, and I kept hearing kittens. And I'm like, that's so weird. Like, I guess it's not weird. Like, strays will find anywhere that there's shelter. And I remember we all got to the room where we kept hearing the kittens. We get into this room, and it's just a room full of barrels, which, since they were a paper making factory, presumably these were old barrels of the solution to make the paper. And I remember hearing it, and it was in the back corner, as it always fucking is. And I got back there, and you kind of had to wiggle your way through everything. And then we all happened to get back there, and the kitten mewing stopped, and then the door shut behind us. And it's like, we're all right in front of each other. So it's not like, oh, the one straggler's fucking with the rest of us. And it was just like, and then it's like, there's no kittens. The mewing stopped. Now the door's shut. Okay, like, what the fuck? What was that?
I'm going to tell you right now, I got to read on that, and to me, it feels like bait.
Like someone's baiting you to go in there and no fucking kittens, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Hey, get it, man. We have candy.
Yeah. And then it's like, today, weirdly enough, like one of the neighbors at the end of our block, I noticed there's a red balloon tied to their sewer grate. And I was like, that's weird. And I was like, and I took a video of it to post on socials later. And I was like, oh, I've seen this fucking movie before.
Yeah, right.
But it's just kind of weird because it's like you literally will assume you'll never see that because it's like, oh, I mean, come on, cliche. But there's just shit like that quite a bit where it's I've had experiences with some of those things, and you're just kind of like, there's not really a logical explanation. And I would love to tell you like, oh, it was at nighttime and it was super scary, but no, we were in that factory and it was like 11 a.m. in the morning. So I mean, it's like it was daylight. You could still see the light outside. It just was scary as shit. And we even went back later that night just to go see if something else happened in spookier situations, and nothing happened. So that's what made it even scarier, was that it's like it happened in the daytime. That's way more fucked up.
Yeah, I will tell you right now, it doesn't matter if it's daytime or nighttime for a paranormal activity. There's a couple things to kick it up. Yes, a full moon might make it stronger. Rainstorms, thunderstorms because of the electricity. But I actually do most of my readings because I do video readings. I do card, mediumship and not tarot, but oracle card readings. And I'm up every morning. He sleeps all day, and which actually works out great because I get up and I do my readings, and I'm the strongest between 7 a.m. and 1 p.m. So most of my I don't do readings at night, and most people want to be like, oh, I'm like, I don't.
Yeah.
What is, because I have a feeling when people listen to this, there's probably going to be skepticism in some of this just because I think comes with the territory. What is something that you would want people to take away from, if they check out your show or just check out anything, following you on social media and so forth? What's something you want them to take away from what you're trying to do?
I mean, I guess a lot of stuff that we've already talked about, like, I'm not being paid to do this. As a matter of fact, I've exhausted my financial resources because I was so committed to the truth. We have all the evidence to back it up. If you doubt my abilities as a reader or medium, just go read any of my reviews. They'll all tell you you're spot on.
Or just get a reading.
I challenge you. We Justin and I just did a piece for Vice TV the other day, and I pulled for the host, and she was shocked. Yeah. I don't pull for Justin anymore, but I used to, and he'll vouch. He's the most honest person I know. And there's not a lot of money in paranormal investigating. When you go in and you cleanse a house, if somebody has an attachment, a lot of the things that involve come from the church. You're not allowed to charge. We're not going to get rich off of this.
Which is weird because the church, at least in New Orleans, charges you to go to the fucking, and not even the church that necessarily is, if I understood it correctly, not even the denomination that is housing the people. They were just like, I guess the ones that were like, hey, we're going to monetize this now, which I thought was weird.
Or you monetize with offerings or like collection, yeah.
Yeah.
Donations to the Lord. You're unholy and going to hell if you don't donate.
Yeah. Weird how that happened.
I want people to take away. Honestly, it's really just one of those things. It's another case of really just be true to yourself and think about, take into consideration other people's experiences and things that they're going through don't just be stubborn and think that your way is the best way. It's just
or the only way.
Or the only way. It's just your opinion. And everyone has their own opinions on things, and everyone, you know, travels different paths of life, and just to be accepting of it and kind of, you know, be more intrigued by it. And if you know, people, like humans should also, like, they should always learn. The moment you stop learning, you might as well be dead, because you're not making any progress. Like, as soon as you become comfortable, you're, you know, not living. So just live a little, I guess. I want people to live a little.
And you know what? This too shall pass. It's gonna be
Last question for you. Where can everyone find you or whatever you would like to plug online?
Okay. For Spooky Babes, we are always Spooky Babes Show on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Our website is spookybabesshow.com. Our email address can be found. So we are always Spooky Babes Show. For me personally, on Instagram, I am the Stormy Daniels. I have the blue check mark. Obviously, everybody knows that Twitter is my favorite sport. That's Stormy Daniels. I don't have a public Facebook, so if you're talking to me on Facebook, you're being catfished. Justin can tell you all his social media, but if you want to support us, please go to our YouTube and watch our trailer so we can get as many likes and comments as possible. Buy some of our merch, come out to our investigations, whatever. Get a reading from me. You can find our email address. I'm more than happy to talk to skeptics. And then the best way to support Justin, of course, is to listen to his amazing music. Go, Justin.
It's my turn. So on Instagram, you can find me at Boneghazi, which is BONEGHAZI. You could also find my band on there, Dead Sled Funeral Company. We have an EP out on Bandcamp, and it's kind of in limbo, just trying to, you know, do more of that. But obviously with the COVID shit, it's really been fucked. Don't add me on Facebook if you don't know me. But if you want to, you know. So yeah, that's mainly just where you can find me and the stuff that I'm doing with music, art, paranormal, like the stuff aside from paranormal stuff too, because I still do have a lot of stuff going on personally, as we all do.
Yeah. Real quick, other thing we want to plug, and I don't know how soon this podcast is coming out.
Yeah, probably in 2 weeks from now.
Okay. So in a couple weeks from now, we have our own beer coming out.
Oh shit! I gotta get that.
Yeah. It's called Para Brew. You can find it here in New Orleans or through Courtyard Brewery, of course. Yeah. And Justin will be Reiki certified pretty soon, so you'll be able to go to our website and book healings and all of that with him.
Yeah.
So I guess obviously with the name, you know, Brewtally Speaking, how did the beer come about?
Oh my God, this is a really great story.
Yeah,
actually,
it's genuine. So
it's so organic.
Yeah, our buddy Scott, who is the owner of Courtyard Brewery here in New Orleans, he is in a new location now.
But I met Scott before you.
Yeah, you met Scott way before that. They were like neighbors.
Yeah, that super fucked up haunted house I mentioned. Scott
Yeah.
That's how we met.
Yeah. So fast forward to him opening up this brewery in this old rehab facility, which also used to be a mortuary. Now it's a brewery. So it's just
because New Orleans
as fuck. So us being friends with him, he was like, yeah, come investigate it with the show. And then it just kind of gravitated from there, where we just got drunk and we're like, dude, we should make a beer. That'd be fucking sick. So now we're making a s'mores stout beer.
Ooh.
And it has, so
it's gonna be sick.
It's gonna be cool. It's called Para Brew. It's the Spooky Babes beer.
Can I show them the logo?
Yeah, you'll get an exclusive.
It looks fucking sick.
Here's the best part. So he was like, what do you want your beer to taste like? And I was like, I definitely want it to be a stout. I don't like IPA. He's got a couple beers at his place that are pretty amazing. He's got like a chocolate one, a vanilla one, a cherry pie one. They actually taste like these things.
They're sick.
Yeah, so he goes, I want it to be a stout.
So this is the
that's really cool.
Thanks, my buddy Brandon Dixon did it. Art by Twig on Instagram.
But I was like, I definitely want it to be a stout, which is very, very dark, you know? And I was like, wait, can we put hot pink glitter in it? Like edible glitter? And Scott was like, yeah, we can do that, because he had glitter in another beer. And I was like, I need hot pink glitter because our Spooky Babes colors are hot pink and black. Mm-hmm. And he's like, okay, well, what do you want it to taste like? What kind of desserts do you like? And I was like, yes. All of the desserts. Justin doesn't have much of a sweet tooth, so I was like, anything you make for dessert tasting, I'm going to be into. So I deflect, And then Justin's most brilliant idea. I mean, my contribution to the cause was hot ink glitter. Justin's was
the s'mores stout, spooky campfire beer.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, that's the only way you probably would have been able to hit it a little bit easy, like more on the head, would have been if you did some kind of a pumpkin beer for fall.
Oh, it's happening. Trust me, it's happening during season. If not for Spooky Babes, definitely for a dead sled thing. I've been wanting to do that for years.
So that was my conversation with Stormy Daniels and Justin, a.k.a. the Spooky Babes. That was a real fun chat. Like I said, went into it with nothing really prepared. I just wanted to have a really loose, interesting conversation, and I definitely think that delivered. Like I said, it's kind of commendable, honestly, for Stormy, especially being as such of a public figure as she is, to, like she kind of joked, to come out and just kind of be like, I think I have these predilections to being a medium and to basically have these experiences where I kind of see events sometimes before they're happening. I kind of can communicate with the dead, and not being afraid to just be honest and upfront about that. I mean, I think about some of the things that we as people are afraid to tell people for fear of being ridiculed or whatever. And I think Stormy is basically one of the biggest people we've had on the show as far as name recognizability, just because of the mainstream news basically that has been happening over the last handful of years with her and an orange goblin that used to be in office. But it's I don't know, there's just something really refreshing about just her forthcomingness with everything. And on top of that, I think it's really just interesting too that not as she's kind of learning what she is capable of doing, Justin's basically right there with her, also kind of expounding upon his skills and his talents at this point. And really just the camaraderie the two of them have found in being with each other through this journey. I think that's really interesting. I think it's probably something that, their bond is probably one that, probably not many people can have. And I think, it just kind of showcases sometimes how the world will put people together that need to be together. And you don't necessarily know why that reason is, but, in this case, I feel like it's to do good for a lot of people and bring resolve to people who are going through some real shit. And that's really cool. I mean, not a lot of us necessarily know what our purpose is. And I think, to find someone else who is going through that journey, I think is just incredible. So huge thanks to Stormy and Justin for coming on. If you would like to keep up with Spooky Babes on the social medias, well, first of all, you can just go to spookybabeshow.com. That should be your landing page for everything. Facebook is at spooky-babes-paranormal-show. Instagram is at Spooky Babes Show. And I didn't see a Twitter. I thought there was one, but I couldn't come across it when I was looking for it. So maybe there isn't one. But at that point, you can just follow Stormy on Instagram and Twitter. Instagram is at the Stormy Daniels. Twitter is at Stormy Daniels. And you can keep up with Justin on Instagram at Bongazi, Bonghazi. And on Twitter, he is at Draco_sadboy, BOI. They will be in the show notes. If you can't spell any of those things. Huge thanks to them for coming on and taking the time to talk with me a couple of weeks ago at this point. And everything for the show. If you'd like to keep up with us, simple enough. BrewSpeakPod.com is the landing page. BrewSpeakPod, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Rate, review, subscribe. You know why that's important. And we greatly appreciate any feedback and any love that we can get. And speaking of love, I want to thank our sponsors, Rockabilia.com. Again, use our code BREW, get 10% off your total purchase order. The Bean Bastard, go over there at beanbastard.com, pick up some delicious coffee. And On Point Pomade, keep your beard and hair looking on point. Use our code BSP15 and take 15% off your total purchase order. And for the BREWtally Speaking Podcast, I'm John, and I'm going to finish this Dragon's Milk and go hang out with my wife. And we will talk to you next week when we have Porter McKnight of Atreyu. This is a good one. If you didn't see it live when it was happening, basically it's about 2 hours and then another 4 over on Porter's Twitch channel. So we'll talk to you next week with a really fun, lengthy chat. Hope you have a good week.
Oh, that fucking sucked. Shao Kahn, what'd you think?
That was pathetic.
Yeah. Yeah. Coach, what'd you think?
Fucking embarrassing!
Okay. Okay. I mean, I knew it was gonna fucking suck, but I think those guys were a little rude. Austin Powers?
How about no?
Okay, I thought we were going to get the Austin Powers vote. We did not. John, use that for your podcast. It fucking sucks. But you knew what you were getting into. It will result in less listens. You're going to see a decline in listeners if you start the show with that. You're going to see 30 seconds in, the number will plummet. And I will be there at the bottom of the plummet saying, I fucking told you. Don't use this fucking riff. It sucks.